Grumman's leadership was already looking ahead. They understood how quickly technology could leap forward in wartime. A fighter that dominated today could be outclassed tomorrow. Leroy Grumman, the company's co-founder, grew uneasy. Too many of his engineers were tied up on large twin-engine projects. The Tiger Cat fighter and a heavy torpedo bomber. Airplanes powerful on paper, but limited to the Navy's biggest carriers. Smaller escort carriers, the workhorses of the fleet, would need something else. At the same time, a test pilot named Bob Hall had traveled to Britain and flown a captured German FW-190. He returned full of praise for its speed, agility, and compact design. That flight convinced Grumman that the Navy needed its own answer. A small single-engine fighter that could leap from the deck of any carrier and outperform everything else in the sky. From those concerns and inspirations came a bold idea. Build the lightest, fastest carrier fighter possible around the most powerful engine available. The philosophy was simple. Strip away everything unnecessary, keep the airframe compact, and let raw horsepower do the rest. Grumman's engineers centered their design on the Pratt & Whitney R2, 180 double Wasp, a massive 18-cylinder radial already proving itself in the Hellcat, Corsair, and Thunderbolt. But instead of another heavy machine, they wrapped it in a body nearly as small as the earlier Wildcat. The goal was a gross weight of just 750 lb, nearly 0 lb lighter than a Hellcat. With less mass to lift, the airplane could climb like a rocket and turn with a sharpness no big fighter could match. Armament was modest, 5-caliber Browning machine guns, 2 in each wing, enough for most naval missions, though lighter than the cannons carried by some late-war fighters. A clear bubble canopy gave pilots excellent vision essential in the swirling dogfights expected over the Pacific. And tucked into the wing tips was a radical feature. Deliberate break points designed to shear off under extreme stress. If a pilot pulled more than 9 Gs, the outer tips would snap away, shortening the span but strengthening the rest of the wing to withstand up to 13 Gs. It was in essence an American answer to the FW-190. Small, ferocious, and built to dominate at low and medium altitudes from any carrier deck. The prototype, designated XF-8, F1 was completed in the summer of 1944 and took to the skies for the first time on August 21st. From the moment its wheels left the ground, it showed remarkable promise. Despite its small size, the Bearcat leapt upward with a climb rate of 800 ft per minute, nearly twice that of the Hellcat and more than double the Wildcat it was meant to surpass. Top speed reached 424 mph, already among the fastest piston fighters ever tested. Yet, it wasn't perfect. Pilots quickly noticed a twitchy instability, especially at higher speeds. The culprit turned out to be hot air vented from the oil coolers spilling over the wings and tail, disturbing airflow. The fix was surprisingly simple. Move the exhaust vents underneath the wings. With that adjustment, stability improved dramatically, though a slight nervousness remained part of the Bearcat's character. What made the results more impressive was the fact that the prototype wasn't even using the intended engine. Instead of the planned 150 horsepower R2 180,030, it was flying with the less powerful 100 horsepower version. Even underpowered, the little fighter already outperformed its larger stablemate, the Hellcat. Pilots left the cockpit convinced they had seen the Navy's future. The Bearcat was fast, agile, and built with grin toughness. Admirals were paying attention, and it was only a matter of time before interest turned into firm commitments. By October 1944, that interest became official. The Navy placed an initial order for just over 20 Bearcats, and soon after, General Motors' Eastern Aircraft Division was contracted to produce nearly 900 more under the designation F3M1. Production was moving at wartime speed, even as engineers continued to refine the design. The early F8F1s looked slightly different from the prototypes. To tame the fighter's sharp handling, the vertical tail was extended and the horizontal stabilizers made broader. The cockpit was reinforced for carrier landings, and new hard points under the wings gave it flexibility as a strike aircraft. With them, the Bearcat could deliver up to 10 0 pounds of bombs unleash rockets or carry external fuel tanks. The fuselage-mounted drop tank, however, caused troublesome stability issues and was often avoided in favor of wing-mounted tanks. Internally, a stronger version of the R-28,000 engine was installed, paired with an expanded 183 gal fuel supply. These upgrades pushed the gross weight up by about 600 lb. Yet, the top speed improved as well, now reaching 434 mph. In February 1945, the Bearcat faced its first carrier qualification aboard the USS Charger. Conditions were miserable: sleet, icy decks, and gusting winds. Even so, the fighter trapped cleanly, launched smoothly, and proved itself ready for service. By May, deliveries to frontline squadrons had begun, and eager pilots finally had their chance to strap into the Navy's hottest new thoroughbred. With production underway, the Bearcat was pitted against the very best fighters in America's arsenal. In late 1944, a series of mock combat trials set the newcomer against legends. The P-51 Mustang, the F-4U Corsair, two versions of the P-47 Thunderbolt, and even the twin-engine P-38 Lightning. These were the proven thoroughbreds of the war, each with victories etched into history. The results startled even seasoned test pilots. In almost every scenario, the Bearcat came out on top. Its blistering climb rate meant it could leap skyward faster than anything else. Its lightweight and compact frame gave it an agility that few heavy fighters could match. Against a Corsair or Thunderbolt, it could turn tighter, accelerate quicker, and outclimb them with ease. Even the twin-engined P-38, prized for its speed, struggled to keep pace when the Bearcat poured on the power. Only the Mustang held one advantage: performance above 25,000 ft. At those lofty altitudes, the P-51's long-range escort mission made sense, and the Bearcat, designed for carrier warfare at medium levels, began to fall behind. But down in the thicker air where most naval battles were fought, the tables turned decisively. Pilots who flew these mock battles knew they were sitting in something special. The Bearcat was not just competitive. It was by most measures superior. In the words of one test officer, it felt less like a refinement of the Hellcat and more like a leap into a new generation of piston-powered flight. By the spring of 1945, frontline squadrons were receiving their first Bearcats. Fighter Squadron 19 was among the earliest, and the excitement was palpable. Pilots described it as a machine that leapt off the deck, climbed like nothing they had ever flown, and felt agile even with combat loads. The timing seemed perfect. With Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan scheduled for November, the Navy's newest fighter was preparing for its baptism of fire. In early August, Bearcats were being fed across the Pacific aboard the carrier USS Langley. Their destination was the war's final showdown, where they were expected to meet Japan's last-ditch fighters head-on. Against types like the Ki-100 or the nimble K-84, the Bearcat's raw speed and power promised to dominate. But history had other plans. On August 15, 1945, Japan announced its surrender. The war was suddenly over before the Bearcat had a chance to fire a shot in anger. For Grumman and the Navy, it was a bittersweet moment. More than 700 Bearcats had already been built with thousands more on order. Almost overnight, contracts were slashed and production slowed to a trickle. The fighter that could have been America's ace maker arrived just a few months too late. Instead of writing its story in combat, the Bearcat's legend would rest on what-ifs, a warplane born ready for battle but denied its chance to prove it. Even with peace declared, the Bearcat's story did not end. Early jets were entering service, but they were still rough around the edges. Acceleration was poor, engines temperamental, and carrier decks were no place for fragile experiments. For a brief window in the late 1940s, piston power still mattered, and the Bearcat filled that gap. Grumman refined the design into several versions. The F8F1B swapped its 450 caliber machine guns for 420 mm cannons, giving it the punch pilots felt it lacked. Other variants included night fighters, reconnaissance models, and drone controllers. In 1947, the definitive F8F2 arrived with a stronger 250 horsepower engine and a taller tail. It could reach 455 mph, astonishing speed for a prop-driven fighter, but by then the handwriting was on the wall. Jets like Grumman's own F9F Panther were taking over, and piston fighters were rapidly being pushed aside. The Bearcat faded quietly into reserve units, training squadrons, and export service. A small number were delivered to French forces who used them in Indochina alongside a handful passed to South Vietnam. In that harsh theater, limited numbers and poor training meant the Bearcat had never made a decisive impact. In the end, it had served its navy faithfully for only a few short years, not because it failed, but because the world had already moved on to another era. The Grumman F8F Bearcat may never have earned its combat stripes, but that does not diminish what it represented. It was the pinnacle of piston-engine design. A compact, ferocious little fighter that could climb faster, turn sharper, and hit harder than almost anything else of its time. In many ways, it showed just how far American engineers could push propeller-driven flight before the jet age swept everything aside. Had it reached the Pacific just weeks earlier, the Bearcat might have rewritten the final chapter of the air war. Instead, its glory rests in theory, in test reports, mock dog fights, and the admiration of the pilots lucky enough to fly it. Later, it found a second life in air racing, where its blistering performance finally had the stage it deserved. What do you think? Could the Bearcat have been America's finest piston fighter if history had given it a chance? Share your thoughts below. And if this story stirred a little nostalgia, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again because the legends of aviation are far from finished.